We're talking today with James Crawford of Roanoke, Virginia. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so begin at the beginning for me. Where and when were you born?
Yes, sir. I was born January 24th, 1947 in Corpus Christi, Texas. There because my dad was a career Navy petty officer. He was stationed at the Naval Air Station there.
All right. So and then he stayed in the Navy while you were growing up?
Yes, he did. He joined the Navy in 1937. Had been stationed in Brazil. Actually, we just learned that he spoke a little Portuguese from that time in there. He was on mostly aircraft carriers. He was a navigator. His admiral, T.L. Sprague, called him Magellan. He actually replaced an officer who miscalculated the date of the invasion of one of the islands that they were invading, and the lieutenant commander was replaced by the chief petty officer. And luckily, after the war, my dad got an assignment in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where he was mostly from, because of T.L. Sprague gave him a good cushy duty assignment.
All right. So, but he's in Corpus Christi when you're born, and then did you move around a lot when you were a kid?
Yes, sir. I went to 15 schools in 12 years. I went to 3 junior highs, 2 high schools. Second grade, I went to 2 different schools. In 4th grade, I went to 4 different schools. Lived in Hawaii, Hawaii. Went to 2 different Quonset huts and 1 different, like, regular kind of a building. I was stationed lived in Lake County Gardens and also North Chicago when my dad was pushing boots at Great Lakes Naval Station up there, and also San Pedro, San Diego. So moved around a lot.
All right.
Oldest of 6 kids.
Okay. So where did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from Madison High in San Diego, California.
All right. And what did you do after high school?
Well, I originally had a scholarship, a National Merit Scholarship to University of California, San Diego. There was not a lot of money in the family. My dad, after he retired from the Navy, first worked for General Dynamics Astronautics, and then he worked for the post office. So I didn't actually apply to UCSD. Instead, I went to San Diego State, which was cheaper, and I transferred my National Merit Scholarship over to there. And lucky for me, because I was in an English class, and a beautiful Hispanic woman, like blue-eyed blonde guys. I had hair at that point, and she picked me out. That's what my daughter said. Zeroed in on me, and I met her when I was 17. She was 18. We were together, married for 42, together for 46. She passed away from kidney cancer in 2010. A great lady.
Great lady. All right. And so what happened to your studies?
My girlfriend and I majored in each other. We skipped a lot of classes. She ended up having to drop out of college. I didn't have very good grades. I was an English major. I've been praised for my stories and things that I had told when I was in English class. I thought I'd be an English teacher with a history minor, and but mostly we went to the drive-in every week, and we just had a great time. But didn't take studying seriously. I got involved in the anti-war movement when I was a sophomore at Claremont High. I wrestled at the 105-pound weight class, and we had a heavyweight and a light heavyweight. One was Zimmerlin was the light heavyweight, Hamlin was the heavyweight. They both joined the Marine Corps in 1962. And in about 66 or sometime in 67, I hadn't seen both of those guys had been in the Marine Corps, had been to Vietnam. And I happened to see them. They remembered me. I was just a little scrappy guy. And they had told me about Vietnam. San Diego, very military town, a lot of Marines and Navy. Again, I come from a total military family. My Uncle Leo served in the 11th Airborne in World War II in Korea. Also served with the Rakkasans in Korea. My Uncle Frank had graduated from the University of Omaha, was a lieutenant on a destroyer. They all 3 met at Tokyo at the end of World War II. So very military. But anyway, they told me, this is not for us. They don't want us there. This is a mess. I think they had been involved in like some, not some really good stuff as Marines, but they just said, yeah, this is nothing. So I started researching it, reading Street Without Joy, a bunch of other books, went to the downtown library reading all the history that I could, and I just said, I don't think they're going to come over here in sampans and force us all to be communists. So that's where I got involved in the anti-war movement. So I ended up in late 1967 hitchhiking with a kid named Jim Jones, not that cult leader. We went up to Canada, hitchhiked all the way to Canada. I ended up getting we lived in Georgia Strait in the area of Vancouver. It was really a rundown, very poor neighborhood. We lived on nothing but noodles, nothing else, and water. I joined an anti-war mine troop, if you can believe that. Actually traded in my draft card. I had not been drafted, and for hamburgers at some place the girls gave us and a couple other guys there. I actually met people that had been thrown out of Greece. They were kind of left-wing people, and so now they had fled to Canada. I got my landed immigrant status in Canada. I had a girl who was the daughter of a Polish pilot that had flew with the RAF in World War II. Beautiful red-headed girl. She drove me over to a Soyuz, British Columbia. I went across the border south, came back in a suit, pretended I was crossing, said yes, I had a job up in Prince George, which I did. So I got my landed immigrant status. And then finally my girlfriend, Phyllis, was just an incredible person, took the bus up there and talked me to coming on back to the U.S. and I decided to become a medic, and that's how I ultimately ended up getting into medicine, in nursing, and being a PA, and then also going to medical school and becoming an anesthesiologist.
So when did you actually enlist?
So I enlisted in 29 July of 1968. I was in Canada when Martin Luther King was shot. I was in California working at a hot dog stand just prior to my marriage when Robert F. Kennedy was killed in California. Went in 29 July, but after my marriage on June the 15th, took a 1-month trip around the country. I wanted to see the country before I died. Went all the way across the country to New York City and back, seeing everything, Mount Rushmore, all the stuff, and just had a great trip. It was really fun. And went in the Army.
All right. So where do they send you? Okay.
All right. Well, my first training was got on the bus, and they're yelling at you and everything. I think I actually had to go up to L.A. and took a bus up to Fort Ord. You got off in the middle of the night, and they're yelling and screaming at you and everything. And I was in a training company. We had on meningitis restriction at that time. And so, I went through basic training, fired the M14, never fired the M16 there. And,
it's just okay to take a drink.
Yeah. Excuse me if I lose my voice there. So it was good training. One of the things that I noticed is I was an assistant squad leader, and the squad leader was a nice kid also from San Diego. He had apparently on an x-ray some kind of a lower spinal abnormality. He says, I'm going to try and get out of this. And sure as heck, he faked severe back pain. He knew he had this finding on his x-ray, which is a congenital abnormality, and he pretended he was having severe pain. They took an x-ray. Oh, your abnormality got out. So there was a lot of anti-war sentiment in that period. After that, so I became squad leader. The good news about that, I didn't have to go on KP anymore. So after that, I went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas.
Before we go there, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things about basic training and stuff is there's a lot of emphasis on discipline and on breaking people down and this kind of stuff and making them all into soldiers. How were you ready for that when you got there?
My dad had been in the Navy. I learned the manual of arms. I learned how to salute, how to march. My dad also talked to me. He was a championship boxer and wrestler in the Navy. He was a star football player in Omaha. Also played defensive back. And so he had us all learn how to tie knots. All of us, all 6 of the kids learned how to change a tire, how to do points, plugs, change oil, do that kind of stuff. He's a great instructor. In fact, one of the times at Great Lakes, one of his companies that he pushed as a chief petty officer, the graduates put all their white hats on the floor and had, at that time, 3 of us. There were only 3 kids, and my one sister was just really a baby. Had us walk on those white hats. They loved my dad. He would come home hoarse every day, but he taught us all how to box and wrestle. But anyway, I learned about military stuff. And when I was a little kid, I thought about I wanted to go to the Naval Academy or to West Point. I mean, I really did. I was, I was very gung-ho at that early stage of my life. But
yeah, you'll learn a little more later on.
A couple of things in terms about rebellion. We had a barracks thief, first of all, the drill sergeants would hit the recruits, okay, and they did definitely swear. And the head sergeant, I guess the first sergeant of the training company, that took the barracks thief out in front of us and told him to take a swing at him. He was hoping that the recruit would do it, and the recruit was wise enough not, and then he made him dig a hole. The other thing that happened there, and I had a propensity all through my life. When you're the new kid on the block and you've been to 15 schools, every school you go to, somebody's going to test you. And so and my dad just said, they start acting like they want to fight, just punch them in the face. And it's kind of like, I don't know what that boxer said, that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And then a lot of times you end up being good friends with that. So there was a kid that had probably not bathed in years. I don't know where, West Virginia or God knows where, Kentucky. But they were actually in the shower, and I came into the barracks, and they're scrubbing him incredibly with a wire brush, and he's bleeding. And I said, leave him alone, stop it, you can't do that, What are you going to do? I said, step up, And they quit doing it and left the kid alone. He was crying, it was just awful. And, I didn't report it or anything like that, but they left him alone after that. So that was only the first of the fights that I got into the Army, but anyway.
All right.
So
how long did basic last?
So that was 8 weeks, yes, sir.
And then where do you go next?
So then I go to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and that was basic combat medical training. I remember going to a big theater. They had a guy that was a medic that had won the Medal of Honor, that when you went into the mess hall, he was the guy that was like saying hi to you. That was his job. He won the Medal of Honor. I remember seeing a first cap patch on him. I can't remember his name at all. But I remember going to the theater, and they're showing these old black and white movies of people getting amputation and serious wounds. And I remember getting sick to my stomach and getting nauseated, and I go, oh my God, what have I got myself into? This is really something. But I paid attention to classes. I tried to do the best I could at it. I ended up as an honor graduate, and then I decided to go into 91 Charlie School, which was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which was advanced medic training.
So what's the difference between what a 91 Charlie would do with what a regular?
So basically, you get nursing training. Most of the nursing, like at Womack Army Hospital, was done actually by the corpsmen. And so you would give the medicines, give the pills, do the shots, do the treatments, walk them up and down the thing, take all the vital signs and stuff like that. And the nurses were basically doing the charting. We didn't have a lot of nurses. Now our instructors were really good. All the nurses that were our teachers had been to Vietnam. I got to deliver babies there. I got to suture. I did all these incredible things. Start IVs. One time we had like 1,000 reservists come in, and we spent all day drawing blood for their tests. And so I learned how to draw blood and start IVs, and we started closing our eyes when we're drawing blood, not using tourniquet. I mean, you started to get, after you'd done a couple of hundred, you started to get the hang of it. So it was really good training. And to deliver babies, I don't know if any of the women knew that their baby was being delivered by a corpsman, but our nurse was right there with us. And I don't even remember that. I think the obstetricians would come in once in a while, but Yeah, but that was really good training. This was the era we didn't have fetal heart rate monitoring. We had the old stethoscope, which had, you would listen with the conduction into the quadrant of the belly where you could hear the heart tones the best, and every 15 minutes you would take the heart count of the baby. But yeah, it was great training.
Okay. Now, I think it may have went right past me here. You're talking about Navy and Corpsman. So you were doing this training where?
This is at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Womack Army Hospital.
Okay, but there's an Army hospital, so that's not
Yes,
Navy
sir.
at this point.
That's not Navy, no,
Yeah.
sir.
And at this point, did they, usually I guess Army normal term is medic and Corpsman is Navy, but were you called to Corpsman?
We call medic, yeah.
Yeah.
Or medical corpsman sometimes, but mostly medic.
Yeah.
Medic is an Army term.
Right. Okay, so I wasn't crazy about that part. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So by the time you finish with that, what month, year is it now?
It is, I think it's early December of 1969.
Okay. All right.
Now, one thing that did happen that I'm now remembering is that there was I think in October of that year, a couple of buddies of mine in the class, we went up to D.C. to the March on Washington. There was, I think, an October rally. I know Joan Baez sang there and Richie Havens. The 82nd Airborne was up there, up on the roofs, manning machine guns, and they had buses all around the White House. And I remember people are singing "All We Can Say Is Give Peace a Chance" and stuff like that. And a lot of people were raising their hands and arm. I did not raise my arm. I said, I'm never part of a crowd. I'm not going to be part of a cult. Of course, I'm in the Army, but you know what? That's a whole kind of different thing. But literally, I mean, there were hundreds of thousands of people there, all around that reflecting pool, you know, below the thing, and they were up there by the Lincoln Memorial. I remember it. So I went up there, and I was in the Army. I also went to Charlotte, North Carolina, saw Jimi Hendrix in concert, which was great. And my wife was there, lived in a little trailer in Spring Lake, North Carolina. I actually gained about literally 60 pounds. When I was growing up, when we ate, I think we didn't say a prayer before food. We said, "On your marks, get set, go." And so my wife had also grown, oldest of 7 kids, and a tremendous cook, really good. So I was having full breakfast. I only had cereal growing up. I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I gained about 60 pounds, which I lost quickly in Vietnam.
But,
all right, so then I went to Vietnam, I think end of December, early part of January.
what's the process for getting into Vietnam?
All right, so I went home to San Diego. And Ray Libby is a good friend of mine that we'd been in the 91 Charlie course together. We hitchhiked up to Fort Lewis, Washington. We got a ride, I think, from Medford, Oregon up to Fort Lewis. We hitchhiked to Medford, Oregon. And then another guy that was in our class, he joined us, and his wife, Jenna, it was Dan Jack, was his name, drove us the rest of the way to Fort Lewis. Then I think we did a chartered airline. I think we flew through Alaska,
That was the standard
and
route
then
from there.
maybe Japan,
Yeah,
and then down into Cameron Bay. And I think we got there at night. It was hot as hell. I know they made us dig sandbags the next day, and then I got assigned to the 101st.
All right. And how do you get up? Where is the 101st, and how do you get there?
So 101st is up in the Fubai, Camp Eagle area, and then Camp Evans. And so we did a C-130 up to Fubai, I think it was, and then they put us on a truck and took me up to Camp Evans and took me to 2nd and 506.
Okay, so 2nd Battalion, 5
Oh, excuse me, 3rd and 187th. That was
Yeah,
at 3rd,
yeah, 3rd.
3rd and 187th,
Okay.
yeah.
And they're both part of the 101st Airborne.
Yeah.
So, okay. Did the 101st often put people through a kind of orientation?
Yeah,
course?
I did do the search thing, and I did it up at Camp Evans.
Okay.
And I understand that they used to do it down in the south somewhere at
It was in
first.
the south, and sometimes it was done at Camp Eagle.
Yeah, but as
I
I remember, I think that I did it up at around Camp Evans.
Okay. So what did that training consist of?
Well, you know, we practiced rappelling off of a tower kind of a structure. We went, you know, fired weapons, you know, M79s, M60, just some basic kind of squad patrolling kind of thing. So they had us go out to some stands and they fired some artillery rounds in so you could see it impact, that kind of stuff, and try to, introduce the idea of punji sticks and be careful about booby traps, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Maybe some of it just getting you used to the climate.
Yeah, well, that was part of it, and I was already losing weight. I mean, it was just, like I said.
All right. So about how long was that training?
I think it was a week.
Okay. All right, and then what do you do next?
So then I get assigned to 3187th, and I get back in the rear, and I'm in FNG, and 91 Charlie, and I'm doing regular sick call back in the rear, and I'm out there actually probably, I think the intent was I'd be more at an aid station as a 91 Charlie, but then what happened is Alpha Company had run into a booby trap, and I think one guy was killed, and I think 2 guys wounded. And they said, they packed me up a ruck and said, you're going to be senior company aid man. Now at that point, the companies were running with 3 platoons to a company. You had a medic with each platoon, and then you had a senior. But they said, because you've had the advanced training, we're going to send you out as a senior company aid man. I think it was Doc Love that was wounded, and I replaced him. And the guys were glad to see me, and they were very nice to me when I came out there. They said, hey Doc, do you want to pull, you're not required to two guard, sort of some United Nations rule or something like that, but would you do radio? I said, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And so while I was there, my company commander was a very interesting guy, Patrick Bryan, very interesting fellow. His mother was an Italian countess. His father was a rich Texas oil guy. They had a castle in Bar, Italy. He was educated in Switzerland, private schools, graduated from the University of London. He was on his 2nd tour of Vietnam. He'd been with the Armans before as an advisor. He was an artillery, I think he'd been artillery trained, but a great guy. He let me fire his CAR-15 and his shotgun with flechette rounds. I fired the M79. I went to an NDP position where the CP was there with 1 platoon. The platoons were working separate at that point. And we riffed and did stuff like that. Only got in one ambush, which was kind of not like a typical ambush. We were working with RFPF troops.
Explain what those are.
So these are regional forces, popular forces. We call them rough pups. Mm-hmm. And they were loud and noisy and not very good. But one night in the distance, it was kind of like if you were at a shooting gallery at an amusement park, we could see people on the skyline walking across, and everybody unloaded on this thing. We weren't getting any return fire or anything. And I do remember that the Captain Bryan, thought that we had maybe wounded a couple of them. We had called in artery as well. So the guys, he said, I want you guys to go out and get a body. Well, following somebody at night when you can have a hasty ambush, probably not a good idea. So the guys told me later, they went out and they got under their ponchos, had a light, and then they pretended to be moved. They just said, well, now we're at coordinates, 395, 492, or whatever it is, pretended to move, but they didn't actually go on because they just thought it was stupid, and it was not a good idea. The following morning, Captain was still, this is the body count obsession thing. Yeah. So we took the Kit Carson Scouts, the RFPF troops, myself, Captain Bryan, and some parts of I think it was 2nd Platoon and the CP element, and we followed a blood trail. We had a dog handler follow the blood trail. There was a blood trail, and it actually went through a little Vietnamese cemetery, and there, if you imagine what an ice cream scoop looks like, well, they had these little mounds of sand that had kind of like a little gully around it, very narrow gully around it, and then on top of it there were blades of grass or things like that in there, and that was a thing, and there were a couple of fresh graves. Well, I just thought it was ridiculous to think that they would have stopped and made it an elaborate grave. So we dug up the 2 freshest graves, and they were just old wooden boxes from our old ammo cans and bodies wrapped in silk, and it was obviously not the people within. One other amusing thing while I was at before we got in any kind of real contract, when we were in this new NDP, there was an old collapsed wrench bunker that was kind of like collapsed at both ends. Probably in the 1950s, it had been dug into the ground, hollowed out, firing ports all along, but the concrete had broken, and so you had basically a lean-to at both ends. I'm the FNG, I'm the new guy, I'm the cherry. And I slept right with my back to the environment, and all the older guys, like the guy carrying the radio antennas and security and the captain, were all, and the fearless forward, the FO, or the recon sergeant it was called actually. And in the morning, we're cooking our C rations. I think most of the guys were out of heat tabs, so we'd take blocks of C4 out of the back of the Claymore mines and heat that up, but you couldn't stop it because it would blow up and blow your heel off. But anyway, one of the guys was right where I had been sleeping. That's where he was cooking his C rations. And when he's done, just like when you go to the beach and you put your hand in the sand, just kind of running it through, kind of like he ran through and he felt something. And he told Captain Brian, I feel something here. And so the captain clears us all away. We all stand back. He digs it out. And it's a booby trap. It's a B-40 rocket, which is a rocket-propelled grenade. It's an old, expired, dead Prick 25 battery, and some kind of a pressure plate apparatus was all rusted out and everything. So they knew exactly where the GIs were going to go. Regularly made, lazy GIs. And I slept on the damn booby trap. It was like, Jesus, well, you are such an idiot. But we did search the area before he came in, but we didn't dig down deep. The sand had filled everything up. But anyway, that's just another story.
But it didn't blow up.
It did not blow up. No.
Now
we took it out and put it away, and then the captain blew it up. So yeah.
Okay, so you've had your first kind of adventure as a new guy and managed not to blow yourself up.
Yep.
Okay, and then just take us through the rest of your time now with
So, we would do, riffs and go on patrols and stuff like that. I remember one time riffing at night and going over to, the platoons were up separate, and somebody had one of the guys had abdominal pain. And on the way over there, and we're, walking an area on dikes, which was always kind of a little bit scary because this is a heavily booby-trapped area where we had...
Okay, so you're still near the coast then?
Yeah, we're in the coast. We're in the flatlands, basically. And it's all very sandy, ambushes, a lot of kind of hilly sand kind of formation, so you could set up, and we would find caches of, weapons and rice and stuff like that. So as we're going riffing over this thing, I remember a Vietnamese woman and walking by the villages, and there were some hard-looking guys there, which I don't think those are on our side. They look really tough and really hard kind of guys. But a woman came to me. I was Baxi, that's a name for a medic or a doctor, Baxi. And she wanted to give me her baby. I don't know if the baby was sick. I'm carrying an M16 for God's sakes, and I got a ruck on my back. In this case, just my aid bag on my back. But she wanted me to take her baby. I don't know if the baby was sick or whatever. We didn't have an interpreter with us. I just, no. And just went on. Anyway, the guy had actually right lower quadrant pain and had appendicitis. So I had a dust-off called in, and we sent him back. Very often, young guys will get appendicitis. So that's one of the events I remember. But then in May, I get word that they need a 91 Charlie over at 2nd and 506 Infantry. Now I've been doing this, carrying the 60, 70 pound rucksack on my back and everything, and I was not real strong. I have to tell you, I wrestled JV and then varsity. I was I'm the head for CIF Western League in San Diego. I was the best in my weight class there. But Dr. Banger, my chemistry teacher in high school, said, "You look like death warmed over." And I went home, and 1 to 6 kids, you know. We were free range kids. There's no helmets. There's no, I mean, there's no, you totally unsupervised. You know, you shoot baskets, you know, till 9 o'clock at night. You just had, if you eat at 6, and if you didn't come and eat, that's your problem, you know. And if you get in jail, I'm not bailing you out. That kind of stuff. It was a different, you know, different kind of a world.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so I had this chance to go over to 2nd of 506 and be a medic over there, and you know, Captain Bryan gave me his address in Bari, Italy. Hey Doc, look me up after the war. Now, a couple weeks later, in early part of June, he was killed, and he's buried in Italy, in Bari, Italy. So I've not been back there. I have been to Italy, but I haven't been to. I thought his wife actually was a ballerina with the Royal Ballet in London. Can you believe this? I mean, this is just you can't make this up. What's he doing in Vietnam, for God's sakes? Just an adventure. His dad had been in the military, so he's just like me. You know, you got to see the elephant or whatever it is. So I went over there, and one of the earliest things that I did, I can remember taking a Jeep out, and my condolences to the Darling family if they hear this or see this, but they had sling loaded the bodies of a helicopter that had been shot down. I think Lieutenant Darling, who was a military academy graduate, I believe, had been shot down. Everybody was like burned and everything. And I think they'd already had trouble with the sling loads. They'd already dropped them and then had to put another body bag on with it. And then they actually dropped his body in the wire at Camp Evans. And I had to go out there and retrieve the body and put it in. And it was just cheap. The body bags were cheap. I didn't hump them in the field. I didn't carry them at all. We usually just make and it was really a problem. I mean, one of the companies, I think Bravo Batty, had a guy that shot himself in the leg, and they couldn't get a helicopter in, and they had to carry him, and they kept dropping him on purpose. I remember you guys telling me that story. So anyway, retrieving his body, and then doing sick call, and then Dr. Harris, who's fabulous doctor. I mean, brave as heck, 2 silver stars, Purple Heart. I helped dig out some of the shrapnel out of his leg after Ripcord. He had been a wrestler as well, and just completely fearless. Tremendous guy. I remember helping him putting a chest tube up on Ripcord on somebody, and he's a surgeon in Worthington, Minnesota. I'd love to see him again. I still haven't seen him.
He's here.
Is he here today?
He's here.
Oh my God, this is incredible. I'm so excited to see him again. Just a magnificent man. I have to say, and I'm going to comment on this, and this is very unusual. The doctor that replaced him was a jerk. His name was Lutz P. Schlicke. His father had been a Nazi with the Germans in World War II, and actually was a German scientist. And he had been in a submarine on their way to Japan to take some of the technology that the German scientists had developed. And the submarine was captured. His dad was sent to a POW camp in Wisconsin. And he himself went to, I think, the medical school at the University of Wisconsin. He told him he had an experiment with flashes lights and caused his dad to have a seizure, but later he and his dad, but anyway, Schlicke, when he came out to the battalion, and we had Lieutenant Colonel Bard replace Lieutenant Colonel Lucas after he was called. Bard was a great colonel, and I also helped dig shrapnel out of him too. But anyway, Schlicke refused to go to the fire base, and was not like he had anti-American feelings inherited from his father, to put it mildly, and he never went out to the fire bases. So I was always going out to the fire bases, and he never would go out.
So let's back up here to when you come into 2506, and it's in May, you start in sick calls and so forth. But Ripcord, the fire base, has already been established.
Right, that's correct.
When did you first go out there?
All right, so I went out to Ripcord, and I came back, and then Captain Harris and they would send a loach, and we'd take turns being out on the fire base. And then I went out to O'Reilly, and I was out there like with Captain Hawkins, and that was a good time. Hawkins was a tremendous company commander. Really enjoyed his thing. We had a lot of rats there, and so I would set up a contest where we would, by platoon, I would have little places marked for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd platoon. The guys would kill the rats, and every day I'd have a contest who would kill the most rats. And then at night, with Major Davis's on the hill, and Captain Hawkins, we had a nightly report, which is part of, you have an intelligence briefing, and how much supplies we have and what's the activity in the area. Like 2nd and 17th Cav is attacked and killed 35 guys out in the open, and stuff like that. And so I started making my medical report. 3 NVA rats were engaged by 2nd platoon at a distance of 10 meters. Result, 3 NVA rats KIA, 1 WIA, 2 AK-47s captured, and they just thought that was hilarious, and I was having fun with it. And the guys were, using, putting, blasting caps, off of that would go into claymores and put cheese on it, and also I was putting out these little tubes that I had. It's called warfarin or coumadin. It causes the rats to bleed internally. I had them put all around the thing. Had another funny incident on there where about a couple weeks before we did perimeter duty around Firebase O'Reilly, we had I'm going to use the phrase shitter, sorry, but it was basically a sawed-off 55-gallon drum with a box and a hole, and one end, that was it. There was the command latrine, which is only for the major. You're not supposed to use it. That's inside the wire. And then outside the wire on the other side is a 2-holer, and we had a ARVN interpreter that would take the DEET bottles, which is your insect repellent, which when you got it on your hands and you held your M16, it would make your stock in the plastic all kind of sticky and everything. But he was down shooting flies at the other latrine with his little squirt gun, homemade squirt gun, shooting flies, and a NVA soldier came out with his hands up. So the NVA soldier was captured by a squirt gun. And they called me at the aid bunker and said, hey, we got a wounded NVA. He'd been out, the ARVN had killed something like 78 or 80 NVA. There was a Cherry Sapper unit down from the north that assaulted O'Reilly while there was the ARVN company around it with the ARVN 155 battery up top. And they, just cleaned their clocks. And so I went over there with a stretcher, picked the guy up, treated his wounds, then we evacuated him. And then a couple of days later, they brought a PSYOPs bird that was, speaking Vietnamese. And basically anybody else out there in the jungle, come on in, we'll treat you well and stuff like that. And by the way, the Vietnamese that I learned in Vietnam was probably mostly swear words, U Mao Mi and Dee Dee Mao and all that. Well, one of my anesthesia partners when I was in practice in Roanoke, Virginia for 35 years was a boat person from Vietnam. Minh Dang is her name. She married one of our cardiac surgeons. She had 5 siblings. All of them became doctors. So that's your immigrant, okay? Working hard and brilliant anesthesiologist. Went to UVA medical school and did her training at Brigham Women's. But I would tell her some of these Vietnamese phrases that I thought I knew, and she would just laugh. I said, you're not saying it right. That is just funny. What? Umao? I said, I think this might be a good. What? Dee Mao, which we all said all the time. No, we didn't know what we were doing. Yeah, it was just like crazy. So anyway, kind of silly. What else happened there?
Well, let's see. Did you have your own incident when he was capturing the?
Nothing bad there. I did have. One of the recon guys walked in one day to Ripcord, and this is really tragic. They had left a mechanical ambush out, which is a booby trap, and I think a recon guy was walking onto O'Reilly, and he walked into the MA and blew his left leg off. and I put a couple of battle dressings on his left leg. His leg was up by the side of his head, up here, and he was doing agonal breathing. When people, when they're dying, will give kind of a gasping respirations. I call it like fly catching respirations. And he was clearly in shock and sweaty and everything. And I gave him mouth to mouth, and he vomited in my mouth. That led to years later, and I had other incidents with guys blew their legs off when I was with the 3rd of the 187th and stuff like that. I had one incident where I had a couple of villagers when I was a 3rd of the 187th that I called in basically a helicopter, and I evacuated 2 dead bodies. I didn't realize they were dead. With the loudness and the noise and all like that, I couldn't even tell if they were alive or dead or not. I said, well, there was a chopper up there, let's put them on. And they could, hey, no, you're not supposed to use, shouldn't have done what you did, but anyway. But years later, when I'm a registered nurse in the emergency room at LA County USC Medical Center, and I got that RN license by challenge because of my Army training. My wife and I are watching a movie called Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remembered it as a black and white movie. Turns out it's not, but that's part of the story. So I'm sitting in the right rear of that theater on the aisle, and my wife is sitting next to me. And we're laughing. The UCLA Bruin Theater packed. Every seat is filled. Everybody's laughing all the way through it. And now understand, I've been in one of the 3 busiest emergency rooms in the United States, seeing gunshot wounds, 10 to 20 drug overdoses a night. I lived right in the middle of gang territory in East LA, East Los Soto Street, man. Big hazard. Gang territory. I walked to work, lived there. My wife was Hispanic. She fit in good. I'm just blonde white guy in a white nursing uniform. But anyway, there's a scene in that movie where the comedian guy is going to cross a river, and there's a dark night or a bad guy night on the other side, and they start cutting off the arms and the legs. And they start squirting fluid out of each of the things, and there's a famous line, it's only a flesh wound or something like that. I never had any PTSD, not waking up screaming at night or anything like that. I probably had plenty of reasons to, but I kind of like my dad and my uncles, just nothing. I just don't, you get numb when you work in medicine. You learn how to suppress your feelings. You got to act. And I started to pass out. I got nauseated, I started sweating, I got watery mouth, I feel like I was going to pass out. I rolled out of the seat into the aisle and low crawled up, and this was completely involuntary. And I started flashing on him and other guys that I'd taken care of that had bad wounds. And went up, and then they had a bench in the back of the theater. I laid down flat on it. My wife went and got me a Coke. I drank a Coke, and we went back in the theater and finished the movie. Now, years later, one of our podiatrists at my hospital, Roanoke Memorial, 750-bed hospital, one of the 3 level 1 trauma centers, and I've seen a lot of trauma. I mean, I've given 40, 50, 60 units of blood to people. I've seen a lot of amputations, gunshots, all kinds of stuff. So I've seen a lot of trauma. But anyway, I got invited by one of our podiatrists, had been a officer in the Army in Iraq, and was he was Ranger qualified, the whole 9 yards. And now he's out of the service, and he's trained as a podiatrist. We did a lot of diabetics that had problems where we'd have to do partial amputations of the feet from diabetic neuropathy and stuff like that. He asked me to speak at the November 11th thing down in Franklin County. And I related this whole story of what happened to me, and then I said, if any of your husbands, your children, your parents have issues like that, go to the VA and seek counseling and stuff like that. Try to make it, but I related that story of how I got dizzy. And then years later to that, I said, was that movie really black and white? And So I ordered the movie from Amazon. It's color. So what I had done, and I talked actually to one of the hospital psychologists about that. He said, yeah, you decolorized it. I didn't want to see the blood. And now understand, I've been seeing a lot of trauma, but I'm laughing and I'm unguarded. When you're a medic, you always have something to do. Okay, I mean, I wore glasses. Anytime I was shooting, my glasses would fog up. I couldn't see anything. I don't know if I hit anything. I might have hit something, you know, but then I got so busy that I didn't. And there's no place to wash your hands after you get blood all over yourself. I could put a little canteen water on me here, but then you got blood, and so you're hoping that you're walking through a river or dip myself into a rice paddy to wash some of the blood off, because the flies just want to come all over. But anyway, that's a whole weird thing. Anyway, keep going.
So let's wind ourselves back around. So you had been on O'Reilly, and those things were happening. Well, you were telling a story before about how you were literally caught with your pants down outside of the wire. Now, where was that in the sequence?
That was on O'Reilly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was on O'Reilly. Yeah.
So you tell that story.
All right. Again, Danny Freeze, and I've got pictures of the 4 medics that were killed with us on Ripcord here. Great guys. So this story is we had that one-holer latrine out there, and in the evening I would take my rifle and usually not have my jungle shirt on, just my jungle pants and boots, and I think at that point I was not wearing socks anymore in my boots. Just felt like because when I'd been humping, your socks get wet and they stay wet, and then your feet get all wrinkly and messed up. So I quit wearing underwear too right away. I figured that out, and got heat rash in their groin. And I'm sure a lot of the guys kind of probably did something similar. But anyway, I'm just reading a novel out there outside the wire, and there had been a lot of trash from the Arvin group that had been there before, fish and ammo and stuff like that, and they cleaned all that, and we're burning all the stuff off to the side, down the side of the slope at that one end of O'Reilly. And I'm just reading a book, and Danny Freeze is up there. He's one of the medics in Alpha Company, and all of a sudden the rounds start cooking off, and I immediately leaped forward onto the ground with the pants around my ankles, and this is not comfortable terrain, just to put it up there, and start pulling my pants off, and I'm dragging my weapon, pulling my pants off, and the rounds are cooking up, and the guys are up higher up on the hill, because I'm outside the wire, laughing their heads off, and Freeze was one of the guys up there, and it was pretty funny. I mean, I was a little bit scared, but it was a little bit funny. I didn't think any of those rounds would actually hit, but you just never know. Life is funny, you know.
So there was just ammunition among
It was
the
just
garbage.
ammunition that was cooking off there. So here's a picture of Danny Freeze. I don't know if that'll show up. Okay, and then also killed on with Alpha Company later was Mark Draper. Both heroic guys, great guys. I met them on O'Reilly. Tremendous medics. They lost their lives. We've got a couple other guys here that I want to show and honor. Richard Conradi was killed on the 2nd of July with Alpha Company, another medic. He got up, he had been told, as I read that book by Keith Nolan, a guy said, somebody was calling for a medic. And I had been told early, they're going to scream for medic, don't stand up, low crawl if you got to go there, or wait till all the shooting has stopped and you know it's clear. And he got up and he got shot and killed. I had been treating, he had like a boil on the right side of his neck. But when we did the June stand down, I had given him some antibiotics and put warm compress on and stuff like that. He was killed. And then Ricky Scott, who was killed with Charlie Company, he came out to Ripcord. I kind of identified with him. He was a conscientious objector. He wore gold wire glasses like I did, so I kind of identified him. I packed his ruck. At one incident, Colonel Lucas came in our aid bunker. I'd had Scott had helped me dig out some shrapnel from a guy that had shrapnel on his leg, put a little numbing medicine in it, pulled a piece of shrapnel out. And I packed his ruck, and I think initially I thought he was going to go out to Delta Company, but actually it was Charlie Company. I told them specifically, do not stand up when they're shooting. Don't stand up. You know, I mean, I was emphasizing, I probably used a bad word saying, don't stand up, man. You're going to be calling at every part of you because you're so dedicated to what you're doing. You're going to want to go help. You hear somebody crying and hurting and screaming, you're going to want to go over there, but low crawl. Mm-hmm. Now, my son had been born in March of 1970, so I mean, I had a baby, but I had to forget that in order to do my job. But anyway, apparently when they re-assaulted, I think it was Hill 1000, Charlie Company and Delta Company from two different sides. Ricky stood up and took a burst. I had risen and told it had been sniper, but then I was told later it was a machine gun. Don't really know. Mm-hmm. So 4 great guys that are not with us here, and their families need to know these were all great men. I personally was not a hero, but like they said, I was in the company of heroes.
All right. Now, talk a little bit about, because you spent a fair amount of time on the Ripcord Firebase, because you and Doc Harris kind of go back and forth. Physically, what kind of facilities did you have up there?
So we were right up on the, I guess they called it the VIP pad or something like that. I didn't know what it was.
There are 2 helipads, so this is
right. So I was there when we had 2 Chinooks that are both shot down. Mm-hmm. One of them managed to get repaired and went off, and then they decided to take the other one off in pieces, and they actually put the helicopter blade of that Chinook, sling loaded it by the Pathfinders, and they were started to pull that up, and this was sometime during the first week of thing. And we're actually looking out the front of the aid bunker, watching them pull it up into the air, and the blade started to auto rotate. And then it started to go from the horizontal to the vertical position, so its blade is going up, and it started going up to where the big I think it might have been a Skyhook or maybe another
Chinook.
I think it was another Chinook pulling it up, and they had to drop that helicopter blade, luckily outside the wire. Mm-hmm. So that was a fiasco, and then we, so that was another episode. Yeah, and I can remember also early when I was on Ripcord, probably might have been May or early June before stand down, we're throwing a football back and forth on the VIP thing, back and forth, and one of the companies is in contact over to the side, and you can look out over that way, and you're seeing the 4th of the 77th ARA. Cobras are coming in, firing ARA, and Cobras are coming in. They're in a firefight, and we're throwing a football and watching a firefight in the distance off of the other end of the fire base. I mean, it's far enough away that we're not really worried about ourselves, but it's just kind of so surreal. Now, interesting story from that. Ian Hailstones was the senior company aid man of that company that was in contact, and he told me a really interesting story. I think it's interesting, just show you how you don't know what fate is like. They had a guy come out to the field that the second he was okay on the way out in the bird, but when he got off the bird, he started saying, they're going to blow my brains out, they're going to blow my brains out, they're going to blow my brains out. And as soon as he got off the bird. So they took him to his platoon. I think the platoons were mildly or partially separated a little bit. So they took him from the platoon that he was assigned to the CP element of the company, and that's where Hailstones was. And we're about to go back into the stand down, which is around the 7th or 8th of June, somewhere around in that time. And so they had him there. Well, Hailstone said it was really weird. The ARA came in and we had it was a friendly fire incident. I had some guys that were wounded by NVA fire, but he got hit by one of the ARA rockets and was killed, and in the head. And Hailstone's like, man, what do you know about the universe?
Right. Okay. I asked a little bit earlier about sort of the setup on Ripcord. What kind of space?
So we were in a bunker. Yeah, we were in a bunker. They had two talks, and I think third talk, and I had our aid bunker kind of in the center there. It was just a small area. We had one litter kind of set up, and then we had most of our supplies were in a metal box.
Okay.
kind of thing.
And were these dug into one side of the hilltop?
Yeah, kind of. It was kind of like, so you had the blacktop helipad, which is very narrow, and then you had like ammo boxes filled with dirt, and then sandbags, over the top, and probably PSP up in the top. And yeah, so, and it was just a small space, but we had stuff for IVs. We got tear gassed on there. I was irrigating like Captain Rich. I took care of. He got wounded a whole bunch of times. He was always coming in for a little bit of shrapnel and something.
He's an artillery battery commander.
Artillery battery commander, Captain Rich, very brave guy. I think he was wounded 6 or 7 times, something like that. And I actually irrigated his eyes. Had a IV bag hung up, and guys would come in with the tear gas, and their eyes were watering, and I would wash their eyes out with IV fluid. One after the other. I can't remember what day that was, but I was on Ripcord then. And see, that's one incident, and again, just taking care of casualties. So occasionally running out to the position. Most of the time, the guys would bring the casualties into us, and Dr. Harris. And again, the one time helped Captain Harris to put a chest tube in somebody that had been wounded in the chest.
All right. Now, did you kind of notice because around the 1st of July, the base starts to get hit with mortars?
Right. That's when I came out. I was supposed to go to O'Reilly. I was in a Chinook with a bunch of other guys, and the Chinook was going to stop at Ripcord and then go to O'Reilly. But instead, they were getting mortared as we flew in, and they said, everybody out. So we all got off, and that's how I got on. Now, I'd already been to Ripcord before, so I got off and ran into the talk, and there were mortar rounds coming in. That Chinook take off. So then I'm there till probably about the 15th, I think, something like that. So yeah, we just basic first aid. I remember one of the guys smashed his finger in the middle of the night up on the 105s, and I woke up and I looked at his finger. It was kind of dangling. I remember getting a little bit dizzy at first, and then I think I put some numbing medicine around it like that and bandaged it up, and then shipped him out. I remember also when Charlie Company got hit. Some of the guys came in and they had I had a otoscope where you could look in the ear, and their eardrums were totally blown out. There were a bunch of guys, maybe 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, there were a lot of satchel charges used.
Satchel charges used. So I remember looking at that. That was I think they were hit on the 2nd of July.
2nd of July, right.
And the stories of Cafferty was, heroic, but also, just amazing stuff that guys were doing out there.
I'll tell you some things about that one, but we won't do that on here.
Okay.
So you're aware of that, and then you're still up, but there's basically the different line companies are bumping into more and more stuff.
Exactly.
And taking more casualties and so forth, and there's fighting on Hill 1000 and things like that's going on the 7th and 8th while you're still out there. Other particular incidents that stand out for that because you go away, you come back again.
Right.
So before you went away, are there other things you remember from that first half of July?
Yeah, just a few casualties, and some guys being killed. I think a Pathfinder, I remember being killed, and I remember Captain Harris saying that guy should not be out there. He's taking too many chances. I'm sure the guy got killed. Yeah, just stuff like that.
Okay. And then about the 15th, and you rotate back off?
Yeah, I rotated off. I think I went back to the rear there, and then on the 18th, the Chinook gets shot down. The 105 battery blows up. Now they're out of aid supplies. I guess they had an axe. They had to chop their way into one of the talks to get out. So they needed new medical supplies, and so some of us in the aid station went down to I think the Camp Eagle or Fubai and got a couple of aid boxes that were pre-packed with stuff, and then brought it back to Evans. And then I flew out with those supplies and brought it to the aid bunker, and brought those boxes we offloaded off of Huey and put it in there. And then I'm there, and I can remember looking out and seeing mortar rounds hitting and stuff like that. I remember also one time going down and firing a 60 by the 105 battery that was right at the edge of the thing, and everybody was taking turns firing the 60 out at, I don't know what hill it was, probably 1,000.
Well, 1,000 was the one that was taller than you.
Yeah. So I think it was something like that, but it was just like the guy, hey Doc, you want to fire? Sure, yeah. And then I left the fire base on the 22nd. And why I left is pretty funny. Dickie Worden was the other battalion medical assistant, another 91 Charlie that I trained with at Fort Bragg. He was over on O'Reilly at this point. And he was burning feces, to use the medical term, in sawed-off 55-gallon drum. So it's a medic. We didn't mind the job because it means you were not out in the field. Okay, when you're not out in the field, that's a good news thing. And he was, I think, he was stirring it, and they had diesel fuel in it, and he added gasoline to it, and it blew up in his face. The gasoline exploded, and he had feces hit him up in the chest and face. So he was short. I was told he was short of breath. So I got it over the radio, and so he was taken there to either 85th or 95th evac. He went to Japan, then he went back to Letterman. He was a 3-year RA. It was a good deal. He did okay. He did okay. No permanent scarring, but anyway, they processed him out after 2 years by mistake. So it was 2 years.
So you enlisted for 3 years.
We got out for 2 years. Just how the Army works,
Okay. So how does that tie in with your leaving?
So I left on the 22nd, and what happened was the lower pad had been an area, and I never went down there to eat. I just ate sea rations. But I know that for a short period of time during Ripcord, they would bring out some hot chow from the back, probably serve it out of thermite cans, but then a mortar round had come in and killed some of the guys in line on that area. And there was actually, you could still see some blood stains on the back wall of this thing. So I'm there by myself, and they're sending a Huey out just for me to take me back, and I'm supposed to be going to replace Worden on O'Reilly. And I'm standing way back, because I'm worried about, every once in a while a mortar round would come in some area. And then I think it must have been a small, like a 60 or something. I see a dust, and I kind of turn my head like that, and I got some spray of dirt, kind of dirt, high gravelly kind of dirt, and a little bit of metal too in both of my thighs, but it's probably the arc of it, however it works. And then the helicopter finally comes in. I run and I dive like you're diving into a swimming pool like that. I just have my aid bag on, is all I have. I didn't have anything else in my 16. And I dive forward like that, and then they took off, and they took me back, instead of to O'Reilly, back to Evans. So I was back at Evans that night, the 22nd, and then the 23rd. Delta's out on the pad, and they're getting ready to go out and get Alpha Company out. So.
All right. Now, once Ripcord has shut down, now what happens to you?
Well, we had a lot of killed, a lot of wounded, and it was just nuts. And they say now 400 wounded, and with our battalion and a couple of attached companies, and 75 killed. So we get every replacement in Vietnam. We got a ton of medics in, including one kid that I thought he was 10 years old. Was not a competent medic. And I told the new LT we got, this kid can't, I tried to teach him how to start IVs. He couldn't start an IV with his life depended on it. And they sent him, and I said, you should not send him out in the field. And sure enough, he goes out to the field. His unit gets in contact. He calls it a jungle penetrator mission at night. Very dangerous, on a dead body. And we heard all the way from division about that mistake. I said, LT, you got it. And this was a new LT. It was not a regular. It was a brand new LT. Okay.
Now, was he? What position did he have?
He had a medic. He was in the rear for a while. We had an access, so we had some guys went out to replace medics that were injured. A lot of the guys that had already served their time. they got pulled out after.
Okay, so the company surgeon or whatever is the captain, but then are there lieutenants also?
Yeah, there's like a lieutenant MSc officer, yeah. So we had a new MSc officer. Our first one was a great guy, really good. I forgot his name, but he was a really good
What
guy.
is MSc?
Medical Service Corps.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and this guy was like an objector kind of a guy and stuff like that, but not very, mostly just hidden his hooch and didn't do anything useful. And then we got a new first sergeant in, which is kind of a funny story. I cannot say his name. I'm just going to call him Wilbert. I'm not going to say his last name. I don't think he's still alive. He had served in Korea, but he was a gentleman that was kind of short and overweight and starched his fatigues. He was obsessed with flies. And this is a story, when you tell this story, it just seems unbelievable. So we had a latrine, which was a 3-holer, that was actually had sides and a back and a roof. The back of it flipped up like a, like a hinges on a door, and you'd pull 2 out, put diesel fuel on, a little bit of gas, light it up, and stir it and read a novel. Pretty good duty. Now I was like an E5, so I didn't do that. So the new medics would do that, and we could have asked other guys to do it, but we were just shorthanded the whole battalion. But First Sergeant Smedley started holding like daily formations, which nobody had ever done before. We just never had formations back in the rear, very rare. I might have said his name there. Anyway, the first sergeant. So he was upset that guys were not there was no toilet lids, but he had them install toilet lids. And then guys were not putting the toilet lid down. And so his great idea was to put a piece of wood, like a 2x4, in the back, nailed into the back with supports in the back of the latrine, so that when the lid came up, it would when you got off of the toilet, the lid would automatically. It's an automatic closure device that the first sergeant had invented because he did not like flies. Now, I knew there was going to be trouble with him because as first sergeant, we'd gotten a rocket that came into our area. He had ran into the bunker and hit his head. And he came to me one morning before this incident I'm describing. Said, I need a Purple Heart. I bumped my head running into the bunker. I said, First Sergeant, I cannot write you for a Purple Heart. I'm sorry, just can't do that. Anyway, so he gets us out in formation. He named the guy that had, he said, we're going to start guarding it because you guys are going in there. You come in from the field where you've been living like an animal, crapping in the dirt, and burying your stuff, and now you get a chance to sit down on an actual toilet, and now you have to lean forward in order to crap, and guys would just knock it out. So he decided to establish a guard duty on the latrine. Is this the silliest, most insane catch-22 thing you could ever think of? So he's established, now, as a medic under the Geneva Convention does not have to pull guard duty. When I was out in the field, I'd do radio watch, and I would do guard too, but anyway. So the first night he sets a roster up, the medics are not on it, and every hour, you do an hour, and then you go wake the next guy up on the list. So of course the first night it goes to like 10 or 11, and the guy says, heck no, I am not gonna go guard a latrine. Hell to you. This is guys that have been out there fighting and killing and being shot at, and they are not going to go guard a latrine. And so the next morning, Article 15, the guy that refused to do it, said, we're going to set another roster for tonight. So the next night it goes to maybe 11 o'clock or midnight, and the next guy says, hell no, not going to guard a latrine. And then the next morning, there's no formation. And Doc Gunn, well, I thought he had a hysterical name. And I tried to reminded Gunn of this incident. He couldn't remember, but I said, hey, Gunn's in the aid station, same as I, early morning. I expected him for me, hey, how come no formation? He said, no, something happened. I said, what happened? He said, well, here's what happened. The first sergeant had walked out of his hooch, and he started walking down the stairs, and he saw a wire stretch across one of the steps. And what one of the guys do, and I made these booby traps myself, if you take a fruit cocktail can, and you take an M26 grenade, and you pull the pin out, you take that little safety clippy thing out, and you stick it inside the fruit cocktail can, it holds the spoon in place. And then if you attach that grenade to a wire, and then hook it up to like a tree, branch, whatever, or what, I don't know what they did on this thing, because I didn't make it. But anyway, he started walking down the stairs. Somebody decided to kill him in our battalion, because they were not going to guard a latrine anymore from headquarters company. And that's the last formation that first sergeant ever held. Was not killed. I'm sure he survived. He had been in the Korean War. I actually looked him up. He had a Purple Heart from Korea or something like that. He was a lifer, of course. But anyway, that's just how crazy the war was.
Right. Okay. So you're there basically until the end of 1970, pretty much.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. December I got out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So after all the ripcord stuff and so forth, and you're back in base and then this kind of thing, were things quieter then?
No, we had, well, going back to like the June standout, we had an incident where we had a lot of some Koreans did a show, and some of the rear echelon guys, and there was a REMF is what the term was, and I'm not used the distinguishing
Rear
word.
echelon mother bleepers, yes.
Yeah. Mother people. Yeah. And some of the rear echelon guys tried to cut in front of the infantry guys that were up in the front row. And I think fights broke out. People were drunk. Some guys ran back to the barracks, got weapons, and were firing them in the air. I had a bunch of drunk guys I was giving IM shots of Thorazine to sell them down because they're wild and fighting. Some guys that get drunk and they just go wild. They want to fight everybody. So I had several guys come in that I gave them shots of Thorazine to sell them down. So that was kind of thing. We also had, then after Ripcord, we got a whole bunch of people in. There were guys coming in that had broken their trigger finger. It had somebody else, stomp on their trigger finger. So they did, I mean, all kinds of stuff. There was not a happiness in there. And then that's when drugs started to come in. I think we had one medic that might have snorted heroin or something like that. Some kind of deal with heroin, I heard.
Well, heroin started to come in after Cambodia because we had cut off the export route from the Golden Triangle.
Oh,
They
okay.
had to dump it someplace, and a lot of them did.
Yeah, I know. I remember there was one medic that I think we thought, and I think it might have been in September or something like that. So mostly, and then we got, basically the rest of the tour was kind of nothing much to do. I think I went on some med caps, giving cough syrup to people with TB, which didn't do anything, but it was kind of a public relations thing. I remember taking care of some Vietnamese kid that actually gets cold in that wet season like there, and a kid that got burned with a heating lamp or something like that. But nothing really too dramatic, just regular. Oh, we did have an incident of. It is apparently a court-martial offense for an officer to have one of their troops get immersion foot. That's a technical term from, I think, World War I. So the problem that we faced was, you don't want officers to be court-martialed. Guys are out there in the rain for a week at a time with constant rain. Their feet are going to get swollen, infected, wrinkled like you've been in the bathtub for a couple of days, and your feet are going to get swollen. So I created a new diagnosis called wet feet, and we put that on the report. We do not have any immersion foot. We just have wet feet, and that was put on because one of the lieutenants or captains or I don't know, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, what can we do? We can't report all it," because we had to bring guys in from the field just to dry their feet out for a few days, and then they go back to the field. But no, this is ridiculous, and we're not going to, I mean, it was just crazy. So I created a diagnosis called wet feet, and that passed, and none of the officers got any trouble. So that was another, just crazy stuff like that.
All right. Anything else from your recollection of being in Vietnam that kind of stands out in your memory that you haven't brought in here yet?
Let's see. really, those are probably the main things. I tend to suppress any of the, the violent stuff and the bloody thing. I know that for some reason, it's like at some conscious level, I never like to go, when my wife and I would go to the grocery store, I never really liked to go to the meat counter. And I only thought about that many years later. I go, why was that? Oh.
All right. So we get now to the end of 1970. Now it's time to go home.
Yes, sir.
Now, do you go home and get discharged, or do you have another?
Yeah. So my son had been born in March of 1970 while I was in the field. In fact, when I was a third of the 187th, I get a call in the field. Your son has been born. I didn't know the day. He's a healthy boy. We didn't know this. I didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or a girl.
Right.
So my wife was pregnant when I left, and he was born. And so then everybody in the company started calling me Papa Doc, and they would get on the radio and call me Papa Doc. And division and brigade got mad at him because you're not supposed to use an individual identifier like Captain so and so or Lieutenant so and so. And so they said, you can't keep calling Doc, because they don't always have stuff.
Yeah.
You can't use that. You got to say, Kilo 55, Kilo 15, whatever it is. You can't use Papa Doc all the time. But that was my nickname in that battalion. Yeah, and I didn't carry that over into 2nd 506 because I barely knew a lot of the guys, honestly.
All right. So now, end of the year, you get to go back home?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, do you still have time left in service?
Yes, because I was a 3-year RA. Again, a war objector that is now 101st Airborne. So yeah, I took a 30. First I went R&R in September, I think it was, to why I saw my son for the first time. Had a great week there, and then went back.
Yeah.
And but then so I had a 30-day leave, and then I was assigned to the Berlin Brigade. So I went over to Berlin, Germany. Got a chance to go into West Berlin was a great place. Had currywurst and getting on a bus, you would ask for a ticket, which is the term is Einfahrt, which I always thought was funny. And I just had a German waitress here at Myrtle Beach that she was German ancestor, and I told her laughing about saying the word fart when I wanted to get a ticket, Einfahrt. But it was a great time. I actually met a stewardess there that was a friend of my buddy Ray Libby. Mickey Rule was her name. She was a TWA or Pan Am stewardess. Her brother, she lived in Berlin. She made me winter stencil. And anyway, her brother had been like 10 or 11 years old and went out and fought when the Russians came in, and they never saw him again. Never knew what happened, but she told me that story. But Ray had given me her address and everything, and I went and saw her, had dinner with her, and that was it, so it was a really interesting experience. We would go over to East Berlin. Communism is horrible. I mean, it was dirty and old, and the people were fearful. It was automatic diplomatic protest if they didn't let you across the border. You had to apply the day before, but they had to let you through in less than 5 minutes, or we filed a diplomatic. So I went with a bunch of guys. We had to go in uniform. The people were terrified of, baby killers that we were supposed to do, which is not true. And so that was kind of an experience. So then I got out of the service in August of '71. Went to the University of California, Riverside. Challenged the RN exam, dropped out of school again. I was told that you could never become a doctor because all the F's you had when you majored in your girlfriend, who was a tremendous person. And people understand when I say major in a girlfriend. She was Rowan Valley Volunteer of the Year twice, just an incredible person. And we majored in each other. I show this picture of her. This is the reason that I got all F's. But she was smart. She just wanted a blue-eyed blonde kid. She was. Her family had been in San Diego since the 1790s, and she was Yaqui, Apache, and Kumeyaay Indian plus Mexican and stuff like that. Oldest of 7. Volunteer of the Year in Roanoke twice. Championship bridge and tennis player. Fabulous person.
So they're telling you can't be a doctor.
Yeah, the guy said you have no chance. We can fill every medical school in the country with straight A students that have high MCAT or Medical College Admission Test score. You have zero chance. All those F's, you have no shot.
So you became a nurse.
So I challenged the RN exam, became a nurse. I worked at Kaiser, which is kind of near Riverside, California. Loved that job. Then I really liked taking care of people, and I loved the emergency room. I started out in the ward, and then a little ICU, and then I went down to the emergency room. Loved that. Then I went to LA County, which is one of the busiest ERs in the United States. Emergency room. Was a charge nurse in the emergency room, so it was gunshots and motorcycle, auto wrecks, 10 to 20 drug overdoses at night, shootouts on the ambulance ramp, stabbings on the hospital grounds, graffiti in the hospital. It was wild. I walked to work, lived right in the middle of gang territory. I did a couple of C-sections in a white uniform. We didn't have scrubs then, and so I'd get blood all over it, and I'd just walk home, throw away that uniform, take a shower, and get a new white uniform on and go back into work. It was really exciting. It was really a fun job. But I think what appealed to me, I felt so helpless as a medic in Vietnam. I mean, when somebody's dying, all I carried was 4 250 milliliter bottles, little tiny bottles of saline, and 1 liter lactated ringers. And now I'm pumping blood into people and fluid and really helping them, and we're getting them to surgery. I felt like I was doing something constructive, made up for all those times when somebody is dying and I really couldn't do much about it. So
how long did you do that?
So I did that. So from 70, I guess that was 73, early 73. And I did that through 78. Now, in that time, while I was working as a nurse, I became a PA. A lot of the guys, there were physician's assistants there. I went through the PA program at the University of Southern California School of Medicine. Almost all the guys that were PAs had been medics in Vietnam. Almost all of them. I think maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions. 101st, 82nd, 1st Cav. Guys had been shot, wounded. They had the same story that I had. So we hooked up. So I became a PA, and then I was hired right after PA school to be an instructor because I knew the hospital and I knew what was going on. And I taught, and then I went to med school, 78. Went to LSU.
How did you manage to get into med school when you weren't in school?
Well, so the first thing I did, I actually went to a foreign med school in the Philippines for a year plus. And I took a test called national boards, now it's called the USMLE, United States Medical Licensing Exam. And then I got into LSU New Orleans first, then I got into UCLA. Well, what I did was I went back to college and I got my bachelor's degree. Again, now I'd been to already a couple different colleges, and I also took classes at East LA College. And I went back and got my bachelor's degree from California State University, Los Angeles. And I had straight A's. I'm working full time, and I'm going to school full time. My family hardly saw me, my daughter was born, and so I have 2 tremendous kids. And then finally, I transferred to. I got accepted into LSU because I scored in the 92nd percentile in this test. That was actually covered the first 2 years, but I'd only completed 1 year. So I got into LSU, and it was great, and it was like Charity Hospital. It was like a doppelganger of LA County. It's again, New Orleans is wild. You never mouth off to a New Orleans policeman. That is the next step to ending up in the emergency room. And so it was a great experience. Got a lot of experience as a med student. Great experience. I was broke. One time I only had 2 cents in my bank account. I took a Navy scholarship. They put me through med school, bought all my books, went to the Navy in San Diego, did an internship there. Then went off on a helicopter carrier called the USS New Orleans. Went to Singapore, Hong Kong, Philippines. Came back, did my anesthesia residency in the Navy in San Diego. And then I did a fellowship in cardiac anesthesia at Stanford, doing heart transplants, heart-lung transplants. Dr. Shumway, a very famous name in heart transplant surgery. Great guy. Was on call 2 out of 3 nights there for quite a while. Then I did Mayo Clinic for neuroanesthesia fellowship. And I also went to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles for another fellowship. So I did 3 fellowships. at each step, now I had to take national boards again after the 4th year, and then also towards the end of your thing. And now this is the F student. Remember, this is the guy that hardly studied, lazy bones. I was in the top 100 of 11,000 examinees in the 1983 exam per thing. So I made up for being an idiot. But Glenn, I really enjoyed that major. So anyway, and I got offered jobs at all those places that I did fellowships in. And then a couple of my Navy buddies had gone to Roanoke, Virginia, which is in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's a level 1 trauma center, one of the 3 in the state. It's a 750-bed hospital, but we should be about a 1,200-bed hospital. We're so busy. There's usually 50 to 100 people that are staying in the emergency room overnight. And I stayed there 35 years till this year, doing anesthesia. Finally staying in one place. My wife passed away from cancer in 2010. Great lady. Just an incredible person. Both myself and my kids and everybody knew her, said she was not 1 in a million, she was 1 in a billion.
All right. Now, you talked about some parts of this. I usually kind of close out these interviews asking, how do you think this time in the service affected you, or what did you sort of take out of it? And you talked a little about the PTSD part, but overall...
I feel so lucky that it introduced me to medicine. And I think the reason that medicine and nursing and PA appealed to me is that whatever you studied was applied to real life. When I was studying restoration and 18th century poetry, or Shakespeare was kind of interesting, but I was going to be an English teacher. A lot of it didn't seem to apply to life, but it was concrete. It was real, and I felt like I was doing, it's a gift to be able to take care of people that are hurting and in pain, and make sure that, this has only been going on for, 180 years or so that we've been able to do surgery. Mm-hmm. I've done medical things in Uganda, down in the Dominican Republic, that don't have good medical care. And I just feel blessed, and I feel for all the snuffies, all the 11 Bravos, and the guys that came out and didn't have something that they could follow. What do you do with that? Mm-hmm. And then I hear the story like Steve Mantai, mm-hmm. who was on Charlie Company, and you could just tell a great guy, and he gets back and nobody believes his story, mm-hmm. and the VA doesn't help him, and General Motors, and all the guys, Mihalko, that walked point for a whole friggin' year, and they go back and it's like, oh, did you just spend a long time in the grocery store for a year? I never talked about the war, never, until the last few years. Okay. I never did it.
What kind of accounted for that shift? Why did you start talking?
Well, honestly, what really sparked it was, I don't know how I heard about it, but Keith Nolan wrote that book mm-hmm. about Ripcord. Yeah. But I never discussed it. I never cried. I cried one time when I heard that Captain Bryan had been killed, who had been my company commander in Vietnam. And then I never cried until about 1994, when my wife and I went through a little bit of a rough patch for about a year. And then we came out of that even stronger. Mm-hmm. Again, went on, for a total of 46 years. That was the first time I cried. But then something around whenever Keith had done the book, I don't know how I found out about it, but I said, oh, and I went to that 2000 reunion. It was great seeing people. And then I started telling stories to my kids and stuff like that about it. And I just feel so blessed. And I feel so grateful to be able to see the guys. Again, I come to these reunions like I was looking forward to seeing Captain Hawkins and Weejiskog, and the guys that I knew, you know, Sherba passed away. Like on my way to Germany, I stopped to see Tom Shepard in New Jersey, and he lived in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Silver Star, wounded on Ripcord, great guy. We went into New York City together. Shepard, I think, had been with Charlie Company, or I'm not sure which, I forgot which company now he was in. But we went into New York City and we went to a record store, and then we tried to go into a bar that was down in the basement, one of those basement bars. No, you can't come in here. You have to have a tie on to get in here. You know, it was like, oh God. And I went with him on his appointment out to the VA. Well, I had a few days in New York before I was going to fly out from Fort Dix to Germany, and the VA stunk at that time. Dirty, a mess. He was telling me all the troubles he had been having with, you know, just trying to get care. The guy was wounded and a hero on Ripcord, okay? I've never been to the VA. Now, I did go that one thing, I said get some advice from the VA and stuff like that. But myself, no. That thing with Tom upset me. But yeah, I'm talking about it now, it's good.
All right. Well, it makes for a good story. So thank you very much for taking it.
Thank you so very, very much for doing this. I've got hundreds and hundreds of books on war. I think it was my own therapy to read about these guys. If you think like Antietam with 25,000 dead and wounded in a day, and what my dad and my uncles went through, and like we've had 2,500 dead from Afghanistan and about 4,500 dead from thing, but thousands of guys wounded, thousands, 10 to 1, 20 to 1 ratios, and what they're going through. And I just hope that I think maybe we're doing a better job than we used to do, because for us, not so much.